"You may tell your brother that the Duke of Asterby has come home," Tristan Ravensmore said, standing in the doorway of the enemy's house with the rain at his back and 10 years of vengeance folded neatly behind his eyes, "and that I mean to take back every acre, every stone, and every shred of the good name his family stole from mine. Tell him I have come to collect." The young woman to whom he said it did not flinch, which surprised him. He had expected the household of the Ellerys to cower when the Duke of Asterby finally walked through their door. He had certainly meant them to. Instead, the woman who had answered his knock only looked at him steadily, a slight, plainly dressed creature with a mild face, and a book still held against her breast where she had been reading it, and said, "My brother is not at home, your grace. He is in town for the season, as I imagine you already know, or you would not have chosen this hour to call. There is no one here to receive your declaration of war but me, and I am afraid it will be quite wasted, for I have no idea what your quarrel is about." Her calm disarmed him more than defiance would have. Tristan Ravensmore, 4th Duke of Asterby, had spent 10 years abroad and in exile building his fortune back from the wreckage the Ellerys had made of it, and he had rehearsed this homecoming 1,000 times in 1,000 foreign lodgings, and in none of the 1,000 had the enemy's household been represented by a quiet young woman with a book who did not know what the quarrel was about. "Then let me enlighten you," he said, stepping in out of the rain uninvited because he was a man who no longer waited to be invited anywhere. 15 years ago your father ruined mine. He forged a partnership, drained the accounts, testified falsely when it came to law, and left my father a bankrupt and a byword, dead of the shame, within 2 years. I was 14. I watched it. Your family took Asterby's lands at 1/10 their worth in the sale that followed and grew fat on them, and your brother sits now in a house half built with my father's stolen stones. I have spent 15 years and every waking hour making myself rich enough and powerful enough to come home and take it all back, lawfully and completely, and I mean to do it. That, madam, is the quarrel. I am sorry you did not know, but ignorance of a debt does not cancel it." The young woman had gone rather pale, but she did not weep and she did not protest. She set her book down on the hall table, carefully, marking her place, and she said, "You had better sit down, your grace, and let me give you some tea, because I think there are things about that story you do not know, and I would rather you heard them from someone who was there than went on for another 15 years believing a version that has cost you so much." "I have no wish for your tea or your version." "No," she agreed, "but you have come a very long way to hate my family, and it seems a shame to have your hatred be inaccurate. My name is Damaris Ellery. I am the younger sister. There is my brother Marcus, whom you have met at least in reputation, and there was my father, whom you knew only as a villain. Sit down, your grace. I promise you I am not clever enough to trick you, and I have nothing to gain. But I was in this house the whole of my childhood, and I know what my father was, and I know what he was not, and if you are going to pull it down around my ears, I think I have earned the right to tell you the truth of it first." There was something in the plain, level dignity of her that Tristan could not ride over as he had meant to ride over the whole of this house. He sat. He told himself he sat only to hear what defense the Ellerys had cobbled together, so that he might dismantle it. But he sat, and Damaris Ellery brought the tea herself. There seemed to be very few servants. The house, he noticed now, was shabbier within than its proud front suggested, and she sat across from him and folded her ink-smudged hands and told him a story. It was not the story he expected. She did not deny that her father had done what Tristan's father's ruin required someone to have done. But she told it from inside. How her father had been a weak man rather than a wicked one, led by a third partner, a man named Crail, who had engineered the fraud and let the two principals take the blame and the profit while he took the greater share and vanished. How her father had died not fat and triumphant but broken and drinking, having understood too late what he had been made a tool of. How the Ellery fortune, far from flourishing on stolen stones, had been quietly bleeding away for a decade because her brother Marcus had inherited the guilt without the cunning and could not bear to profit from it, and had spent years and money he did not have trying in secret to trace the true architect of the ruin and make what restitution he could. "My brother is not your enemy, your grace," she said quietly. "He is a man trying to atone for a crime he did not commit and cannot undo. And I am nobody at all, the sister no one remembers, kept at home to manage a house we can no longer afford. But I will not sit and let you tear down what little we have on the strength of half a story. If you want vengeance, at least take it against the right man. His name was Crail. And if you are the resourceful duke you claim to be, you might, between us, help my brother find him, instead of finishing the work that Crail began." He did not answer her at once, and the silence in the shabby hall stretched between them, filled with the tick of an old clock and the drum of rain on the tall windows. "You are asking me," Tristan said slowly, "to set aside 15 years, to hear that the whole architecture of my life, the exile, the labor, the fortune I built for one purpose only, was raised against the wrong man. Do you understand what you ask? A hatred that old is not a coat one takes off because a stranger pours one tea and tells a pretty story. It is the beam that holds up the roof. Pull it out and the whole house comes down." "I understand it very well," Damaris said. "I have lived my own life under a beam I did not put there, the beam of my father's guilt which fell on my brother and on me though we were children when it happened. I know exactly what it is to have your whole house built around another man's crime. I am not asking you to take off your coat, your grace. I am asking you to look before you tear down my roof whether the crime you mean to punish is even the one that was committed. That is all. Look first. If you look and find I have lied, then finish what you came to do and I will not blame you. But look." Tristan Ravensmore was not a man accustomed to being told to look before he struck. He had spent 15 years striking. It was the only thing that had kept him alive and moving through the long gray years of exile, the certainty of the blow he would one day deliver. And here was a small, plain, level-eyed woman in a failing house telling him, without heat, without pleading, that his certainty might be founded on a lie. He wanted to dismiss it. He wanted to rise and finish his errand and be gone. He found that he could not, because the thing he could not get past was not her arguments could be answered, but her manner. She had nothing to gain by honesty and everything to gain by flattery or by fear, and she had offered him neither. She had offered him only the truth as she understood it, plainly, at cost to herself, and Tristan had lived long enough among liars to know the sound of a person who was not lying. "Why," he said at last, "are you telling me this? Your brother is the injured party in your account, not you. If I destroy this house, you lose your home. If I spare it on your word and your word proves false, your brother will never forgive you the risk. You gain nothing either way. So why?" Damaris considered the question seriously, which he was coming to see was her way with all questions. "Because it is true," she said, "and because I have spent my whole life watching truth go unsaid for fear of the powerful, and I am tired of it. My father did not speak when he should have, and it destroyed 2 families. My brother speaks only in secret, tracing his restitutions quietly, afraid to raise his head. And I am the sister no one consults, kept at home, of no account to anyone. But I was here. I saw what happened and what did not. And when the Duke of Asterby walks into my hall breathing fire against the wrong man, I find I would rather tell him the truth and lose my home than hold my tongue and keep it, because a home kept by silence is not worth keeping." She met his eyes steadily. "You may call it foolishness, your grace. My brother would. But I have decided that I will not be another Ellery who let a great wrong stand for fear of a great man. Do what you will with the truth now that you have it. My part is done." She rose then and gathered his empty cup, and Tristan understood that he was being, very courteously, dismissed, that this woman who had every reason to grovel had said her piece and would not spend one more word begging for what she believed was simply right. He rose too and took up his hat, and at the door he paused. "You have not asked my name," he said. "You called me your grace and the Duke of Asterby, but you have not asked my name." "I did not think a man who came to pull my house down would care to be known to me by anything but his title," she said. "It seemed safer for us both to keep to titles." "Tristan," he said, "Tristan Ravensmore. I do not know why I tell you except that you have been more honest with me in half an hour than my own household has been in years, and it seems a poor return to leave you nothing but a title." He set his hat on his head. "I make no promises, Miss Ellery, but I will look. You have that much of me. I will look." He went out into the rain and mounted and rode away from the failing house through the wet dark, and told himself the whole way to town that he had promised nothing, that he would look only to confirm his hatred and be done. But the beam had shifted. He could feel it. Something in the great old architecture of his vengeance had moved for the first time in 15 years, and he did not yet know whether the house would stand or fall, only that the plain, truthful voice of a woman with a book had set it trembling, and that he could not now unhear it. He did not believe her, not at first. 15 years is a long time to build a house of hatred, and a man does not tear it down on the word of a quiet woman with a book, however level her eyes. He left the Ellery house that evening telling himself that Damaris had spun a clever tale to buy her brother time, and he went to town, and he said his own agent's men he paid a great deal to find things out, to prove her a liar. They proved her true instead. There had indeed been a third partner. There was indeed a man named Crail, who had left the country with the larger part of the plunder, while two families destroyed themselves over the remainder. And there were, buried in old records Tristan's own money now pried open, the traces of Marcus Ellery's 15-year search. Quiet inquiries, small restitutions made anonymously to lesser creditors of the old Asterby estate, a slow, secret unraveling of guilt by a man who could have simply enjoyed his stolen comfort, and had chosen instead to spend himself trying to set it right. The Ellerys had not grown fat. They had been dying by inches under a burden they had inherited but not earned, exactly as the sister had said. Tristan Ravensmore sat with these findings a long time in his town lodgings, and felt the great edifice of his hatred, so carefully built, so long inhabited, shift on its foundations. He had come home to punish a villain. There was a villain, but it was not the man he had come to punish, and it was not the family, and it was certainly not the quiet sister who had poured him tea in a shabby house and told him the truth at the risk of her own roof. He went back. He told himself he went back to speak to Marcus, to make common cause against Crail, to redirect his 15-year engine of vengeance toward its proper target. And that was true. But it was Damaris he asked for at the door, and it was Damaris he found in the shabby morning room mending a curtain, and it was Damaris who rose with that same steady mildness and said, "You have been making inquiries, Your Grace. I can see it in your face. You found that I was telling the truth, and you do not know what to do with it." "I found," Tristan said, "that I have hated the wrong people for 15 years, and that a woman I met once whom I threatened in her own doorway was braver and more honest with me than anyone has been in the whole of my adult life. I do not know what to do with that. You are right." He set his hat down. "Miss Ellery, I have come to help your brother find Crail, and to make what amends I can for coming here breathing fire against a house that has suffered as much as mine. But I confess I did not ask for your brother at the door. I asked for you." Something moved in her mild face-not coquetry. She had none of that but a kind of careful surprise, as though she had long ago stopped expecting to be asked for by anyone. "I am the sister no one asks for," she said. "You need not. I am not the injured party, that is Marcus. I only happen to be at home." "You happened," Tristan said slowly, "to be the one person in either of our families who saw the whole truth and had the courage to say it to an angry man who could have ruined you for it. That is not happening to be at home, Miss Ellery. I have spent 15 years among clever, ambitious, frightened people, and I have met almost no one with your particular kind of quiet courage. Your brother searched for justice in secret. You handed it to your enemy over a cup of tea, knowing it might cost you everything because it was true. I find I cannot stop thinking about it, or about you." The hunt for Crail drew the two houses together, in a way that 15 years of enmity could never have predicted. Marcus Ellery, when Tristan first proposed the alliance, received it with the stunned wariness of a man who has spent his life braced for the Duke of Asterby's vengeance, and cannot at first credit that vengeance has become partnership. He was a thin, careworn man some years older than his sister, and Tristan saw in his face the marks of the long secret labor Damaris had described, the years of guilt carried for a crime he had not committed, the fortune quietly spent on restitutions he could ill afford, the head kept perpetually down. But he was honest, and he was clever in the patient way of a man who has had to be, and when he understood that Tristan meant it, that the Duke's formidable resources, his agents, his money, his reach into places a bankrupt gentleman could never go, were truly to be turned against Krail and not against the Ellery, something in him straightened for the first time in years. "I have been chasing this man alone for 15 years, Marcus said, spreading his careful, secret papers across the library table. "With what little I had and what hours I could steal, afraid the whole time that you would come home and finish us before I could prove the truth. And now you are here, and instead of finishing us you are offering me your right hand." He looked up, and his eyes were wet. "I do not deserve your help, your grace. My father's name is on the ruin of yours. But by God I will take it, for my sister's sake and yours and my dead father's, and we will run this devil to earth together if it is the last thing either house ever does." It was not the last thing either house did, but it was very nearly the making of both. Tristan's agents, loosed at last upon a properly identified quarry, moved with a speed and reach that Marcus's lonely inquiries never could. Within weeks the trail that had gone cold a decade before grew warm again. Krail had gone abroad, had changed his name, had settled at last into a comfortable and respectable old age in a foreign city, fat on the plunder of 2 families, believing himself long forgotten. He was not forgotten. The machinery Tristan Ravensmore had built across 15 years for the purpose of vengeance turned out to be precisely the machinery required to reach across a continent and take hold of a hidden man, and it closed around Krail slowly and inexorably, and Tristan felt, as it closed, a grim satisfaction wholly unlike the poisoned thing he had carried so long. This was not vengeance for its own sake. This was justice, shared in company, and it warmed rather than consumed. But it was the hours between the work that changed him past all recovering. He found reasons to be at the Ellery house that had nothing to do with Krail. He came ostensibly to consult Marcus, and stayed to walk in the garden with Damaris, who had kept the beds alive through all the lean years by her own hand, because there had been no gardener to spare. He learned that she rose before dawn to do it, in the hour before the household woke, so that no one should see her at labor unfit for a gentlewoman. And when he said, one morning, having risen early himself and caught her at it, that she need not hide it from him, she looked at him with mild surprise and said, "I do not hide it because I am ashamed of it. I hide it because if Marcus saw how much I do he would grieve that he cannot afford to spare me, and he grieves enough. One learns, your grace, to carry things quietly, so as not to add one's own weight to a burden already too heavy for the people one loves." Tristan stood in the dawn garden and looked at this woman kneeling in the earth to keep beauty alive in a house too poor to pay for it, hiding her own labor to spare her brother's feelings, and felt the last of his old self crack and fall away. He had spent 15 years certain that the world contained no unselfishness, that every kindness was a transaction, that he had been a fool as a boy to believe otherwise, and had wised up in the hard school of ruin. And here in the dirt was the living refutation of everything the ruin had taught him. Damaris Ellery expected nothing, asked for nothing, hid her own goodness so that it should not trouble anyone, and she did it not because she was weak, but because she was strong, strong in exactly the way he had trained himself never to be. "You are looking at me strangely, your grace," she said, sitting back on her heels, a smudge of earth on her cheek. "You do that a great deal. Have I dirt on my face? I usually have dirt on my face." "You have dirt on your face," Tristan said, "and it is, at this moment, the finest thing I have seen in 15 years, and I do not know what to do with that fact, Miss Ellery, so I am simply standing here looking at it." She laughed, the small, startled laugh, quickly covered, as though laughter were a thing she had almost forgotten she was allowed in. Tristan resolved, standing there in the dawn among her roses, that whatever else came of the ruin of 2 houses, he would spend whatever remained of his life making certain that Damaris Ellery laughed like that every day, and never again had to hide it. He wanted to be the reason she remembered she was allowed. There was an evening near the end, when the work was all but done and Crail all but taken, that Marcus Ellery found Tristan alone in the library and spoke to him with the directness of a man who has decided he can no longer afford not to. "You are in love with my sister," Marcus said. "It was not a question. I have watched you these weeks, your grace. You come to consult me and you spend the hour walking in the garden with Damaris. You rise before dawn, I am told, to catch her at her roses. You look at her across my own table in a way I have not seen a man look at a woman in a very long time, and it is not the way a duke looks at a poor gentlewoman he intends to trifle with. So I will ask you plainly once, and then we need never speak of it again. What are your intentions toward her? Because she is the best of us, your grace. She carried this whole house on her back through years that would have broken a stronger-seeming person, and she did it without a word of complaint or a moment's self-pity, and she has been overlooked her entire life by everyone, including, to my shame, me. If you mean to add yourself to the long list of people who overlooked her, or worse, to raise her hopes and then remember you are a duke and could have anyone, then finish your business with Crail and go, and I will manage without your help rather than see her hurt." Tristan Ravensmore set down the paper he was holding. "When I came to this house," he said, "I came to destroy it, you know that. I stood in your hall and promised to take back every stone, and your sister poured me tea and told me the truth at the risk of her own roof, and in doing so she began to take apart, brick by brick, a hatred I had spent 15 years building, until there is nothing left of it but the good it can do against the right man. I did not come here to fall in love, Ellery. I came here armored against everything." She got past the armor with a cup of tea and a plain, honest word, and I have been trying ever since to understand how, and I think the answer is simply that she is exactly what she appears to be, all the way through, which is a thing I had stopped believing any person could be. He met Marcus's eyes steadily. "My intentions are these. I intend to ask her to marry me, when Crail is finished and the shadow lifted from both our houses, so that when I ask there is nothing hanging over the question but the question itself. I intend to spend whatever remains of my life making certain she is never overlooked again. And I intend, if she will have me, to give back to your family in full measure what my grief and my hatred nearly took from it. That is what I intend, Marcus. You have my word as a man, which I value now more than my word as a duke, having learned from your sister that the man matters and the duke does not." Marcus Ellery was silent a long moment. Then he crossed the room and held out his hand, the hand of the son of the man who had ruined the Duke of Asterby's father, and Tristan took it, and the two men who should by every law of blood and grievance have been enemies to the grave stood gripping hands in the library of a house that had nearly been pulled down, and something 15 years in the breaking was, in that grip, quietly mended. "Then you have my blessing," Marcus said, his voice rough, "for whatever a ruined man's blessing is worth, and I will tell you one thing, your grace, to carry with you when you ask her. She has spent her life certain that she was of no account to anyone. You will have to be patient. She will not believe you at first. She has had too much practice at being overlooked to trust being seen. But if you are patient, and if you are true," Marcus's eyes were bright, "you will give her back something I have grieved to watch her lose a little more of every year. You will give her back the belief that she is worth loving. And there is no fortune, your grace, not all the stones of Asterby, worth so much as that." The matter of Crail was concluded before the year turned. The man was brought to law, the stolen fortune, or the greater part of it, was disgorged, and the restitution flowed to both the ruined houses, so that the lands and the good name of Asterby were restored to Tristan at last, and the crushing debt of guilt and money was lifted from the Ellerys. It was everything Tristan had come home to achieve, achieved in full. And on the evening the last of the papers were signed, he found that the achievement was the least of what he had gained, and that the thing he had truly come home for was a woman he had not known existed until she opened a door in the rain. He found Damaris in the garden of the Ellery house, in the blue autumn dusk, among the beds she had kept alive through all the lean years by her own labor, because there had been no gardener to spare. She was cutting the last of the season's roses, and she looked up when he came, and there was a new ease between them now, the ease of people who have fought a war on the same side and won it. "It is finished, then," she said. "Marcus told me. Your name is cleared, your lands are yours, and Krail will pay for all of it. You have what you came for, your grace. I am glad, truly I am, your father is avenged, and mine in a way is redeemed, and 2 households can stop grieving." She smiled, though there was something wistful in it. "I suppose you will go home to Asterby now. It is a great estate, they say. You will be very grand there and very busy, and we will read about you in the papers." "Damaris," Tristan said. She had never heard him use her Christian name. She went still, the shears half open in her hand. "When I came to your door in the rain," he said, "I told you I had come to collect, to take back every acre and every stone and every shred of the name your family stole. And I have. But I have discovered, madam, that the account was drawn up wrong from the beginning, because it left out entirely the one thing I actually lost when I was 14 and watched my father die of shame. I did not lose only lands and a name. I lost the belief that the world contained any kindness at all, or any honesty, or anyone who would tell a hard truth at cost to themselves for no reward. I spent 15 years certain that no such thing existed, and I built myself into a weapon on that certainty. And then a plain sister no one asked for opened a door and handed me the truth over a cup of tea at the risk of her own roof, and I have been slowly discovering ever since that the most valuable thing the Ellerys ever took from me was not the land." He came closer, across the dusk-blue garden. "You gave it back. Not the land. Krail gave back the land. You gave back the belief. I did not come home to find it. But I found it, and it is standing in front of me holding a pair of garden shears, and I am not going home to Asterby to be grand and busy and read about in the papers. Not without you." The shears trembled and were still. "I am the sister no one asks for," she said, very low, as though it were a fact she had made her peace with long ago and did not dare disturb. "You are a duke restored to a great name. You could ask anyone now. Half the mothers in England will be at your door by spring." "I do not want anyone," Tristan said. "I have spent my whole life among people who wanted things, wanted my ruin, wanted my money, wanted my name. You are the only person I have ever known who wanted nothing from me at all, who told me the truth when the truth could only harm you, who kept a dying house alive with her own hands and never once asked to be thanked, and who laughed this afternoon and covered her mouth as though she had forgotten she was allowed. I want to be the reason you remember you are allowed, Damaris, every day for the rest of your life. I came home for vengeance and I found something I did not know I had lost, and I will not make the mistake of leaving it in a garden because I am too proud or too stupid to say the plain truth. I love you. Not the Ellery sister, not the truce, not the redemption of 2 households. You, marry me. Come home to Asterby not as the end of an old war, but as the beginning of the only thing in my life I have ever wanted for its own sake." Damaris Ellery set down the shears among the last roses, and when she looked up at him, her mild face had come open at last, all the careful patience of years of being overlooked breaking into something luminous, and her eyes were bright with tears she did not try to hide. "I stopped hoping for anything a long time ago," she said unsteadily. "It seemed safer. One cannot be disappointed by what one does not hope for. And then you came breathing fire into my hall of all the unlikely miracles, and I found I was hoping again before I could stop myself, and I have been furious at myself for it ever since, because I was so certain it could only end with you grand at Asterby and me forgotten in a shabby garden." A tear slipped free and she laughed through it, that same small startled laugh, unhidden now. "You dreadful man. You came to pull my house down and instead she pressed her hand to her mouth, then took it away deliberately and let herself be seen. Yes, yes, Tristan, I will marry you. And I warn you I intend to go on telling you hard truths for the rest of your life, whether you like them or not." "I am counting on it," he said, and took the roses gently from her hands and then her hands themselves and held them. They were married in the spring, and the 2 families that had spent 15 years destroying each other stood together in the same church, which the whole county declared the greatest wonder of the age. Marcus Ellery gave his sister away and wept doing it, for he above all knew what she had been and what she was becoming. And the Duke of Asterby, restored to his lands and his name, and something far more valuable than either, took home to the great estate a duchess whom no one had ever asked for, who ran his house with the same quiet competence with which she had kept a dying one alive, who told him the truth at his own dinner table in front of astonished guests, and who never again forgot that she was allowed to laugh. He kept the last of those autumn roses pressed in a book, the book she had been holding the day he came breathing vengeance into her hall, and on their every anniversary he would take it out and say, gravely, "I came to collect a debt." And Damaris would answer every year with her hand warm in his, "And you did, your grace. You collected far more than you were owed." And the Duke of Asterby, who had come home for revenge and found the one thing worth keeping, agreed that he had, and had never once regretted the wrong turning his heart had taken in an enemy's rainy doorway.